Just yesterday, I got in the mail an invitation to my college's 20th anniversary class reunion for my graduating class for my undergraduate. And to be honest, I have never been one for reunions. Not high school, not college, not any of those other moments or milestones in faith. I don't have anything against it if that's your cup of tea. It's just not been mine. And I suppose for me, part of it is that I have a really hard time shaking the whole idea that at a reunion you gather with people just to look backward and remember what had been, and to discover, kind of disappointingly, that you're not in college or high school anymore, and everybody has grown up, at least you hope, and moved beyond who they were or the childish immaturity of the pranks they pulled in high school or college, or the immature attitudes or impressions or convictions you had from an earlier time in life. You hope that each of us has matured and moved on, and that's just it. If you go back to a reunion, presumably with the positive memories of whatever was good, but you discover nobody is back in high school or college anymore. We've all moved beyond where we were, and unless people have continued to stay in touch with one another over time, you're just gathering to discuss how far you've drifted apart, and that the past you all share, the one thing you do have in common, isn't the same anymore. Like I say, everybody's experience is different, and maybe you've stayed in close touch with your friends or classmates from high school or college or other places along the way, and it's really helpful to get together in the same room with them. But I've been thinking a lot, especially since getting that piece of mail, about how different it's meant to be for us as the followers of Jesus, and yet how often we treat this community called church as honestly just a religious class reunion. Here's what I mean. I've been thinking a lot about the words we're going to hear from Jesus this coming Sunday in the gospel reading, where Jesus gathers his disciples and he's preparing them for the change of him leaving, of him going. He's headed toward the cross. He says these words to his disciples on the night of his betrayal, but Jesus is thinking further beyond that too, not only to the cross and to resurrection, but also to when he's not with them in the same room, at least physically, the way they were used to, when he ascends and fills all places, all creation, but things will be different for them. And he says to them, don't worry, I'm going to be with you in a whole new way, but it's going to be different moving forward. He says this, I still have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. When the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all truth, for he will not speak on his own, but will speak whatever he hears, and he will declare to you the things that are to come. He will glorify me because he will take what is mine and declare it to you. All that the Father has is mine. For this reason I said that he will take what is mine and declare it to you. Those words are really important, but I also have to admit, sometimes they make a church person like me, especially in the tradition I come from as a Lutheran Christian, uncomfortable. Because, to be honest, we're pretty good at telling stories of what God did, past tense. We're decent at that. Every Sunday, we gather in worship and tell stories with several readings from the Scriptures, Hebrew Scriptures, Old Testament, epistles, and gospel stories. We get at least 3 or 4 different reports of what God did or said in the past. And sometimes we are so focused on that, on what Jesus did for us, past tense, at the cross, and what Jesus did for us in the resurrection, that it could sound like we have nothing to say about the present moment or beyond. And so sometimes we can slide into this really comfortable place of, a high school or college reunion, where you gather around the table and reminisce about things that were great back in the good old days, but aren't happening now. You get the sense Jesus knows that's going to be a temptation for his followers. That they're Peter and James and John and Andrew and Nathaniel and maybe Mary Magdalene and Joanna as well. They'll all be sitting around tables talking about, oh man, you remember the time when Jesus fed 5,000 people? Or hey, remember that time when we caught that fish and there was a coin in its mouth? Or hey, remember that time that they ran out of wine and Jesus turned water into wine? You can imagine how easy it would have been for the community of Jesus followers just to become a reunion remembering times that used to be great, but aren't here anymore. Because after Jesus' resurrection, after Jesus ascends, even after Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit is poured out on the disciples, at some point things settle down, and there aren't new miracles every day. There are maybe cool things that happen occasionally, periodically, but you can never quite pin them down or predict them. So how easy it would have been for the followers of Jesus just to get together and to think only in terms of we're here to remember things that used to be really cool but aren't happening anymore. Even how tempting it is for us to treat this gift called Holy Communion that we celebrate every week when we get together, to treat it just like remembering, like it's the reunion meal they have at your high school reunion. You sit in the old high school cafeteria and reminisce about the old artificial mashed potatoes and the hairnets from the lunch ladies or what have you. Sometimes it's tempting. Sometimes it's easy to think that what we do when we get together is tell stories about what used to be and eat a meal to remember what God did a long time ago, as though God has stopped acting, as though all we are is a group that remembers, but where God isn't working anymore, or speaking anymore, or guiding anymore. And that can be really difficult. One, because in the life of the church, it is so easy for us to remember in our minds, with kind of the rose-colored lenses of nostalgia, to remember a far back time in history, in our memory, when we think things were great in the life of the church. Our congregations were full, and there were lots of people, and things were expanding, and we built, and we did this, and we did that, and everybody in the community, everybody in town, all went to church, and wasn't it better then? And now things feel so different, and it can feel very, very much like all we have to say is we wish we had a time machine to take everybody back to a time that isn't anymore. And I gotta be honest, for anybody who walks in our doors, who hears us talk like that, who interacts with us on a daily basis, if all they hear from us is a wistfulness of we wish it were like it used to be, but we can't make it that way, who on earth wants to be a part of that? Who on earth thinks that's alive and vibrant and thriving? Who on earth thinks that's world-changing? Just remembering how things used to be but aren't anymore. And that's why it is such deeply good news, even if it's also a little scary, to note that Jesus doesn't talk that way. When he's getting his disciples ready, he doesn't say, look, I'm not going to be there, but you're going to have weekly reunions, and you're going to remember all the good old days, and the Holy Spirit will help you to remember things that you did so you don't forget them, and we'll remember the good old days, and that will be the end of it. You'll just be a group that meets and talks about things that used to happen. Jesus doesn't talk that way. Instead, Jesus says, when I'm away from you, when I'm taken into heaven, when I ascend to the Father, you will have my ongoing presence through the Spirit of truth, the Holy Spirit, the advocate, this one who is God among us and with us and as near to us as our breath, and within us like a breath. And Jesus says something that, again, can make us uncomfortable, but we really need. He says, I have more things I need to tell you, but you're not ready yet. So instead of saying, well, I guess you won't get a chance to hear it, we'll only remember things we've already covered, the Holy Spirit will keep speaking, will keep guiding, will keep moving you in new directions. You will face situations you haven't faced yet. And instead of looking back at your list of Bible verses and going, well, we don't have a story about that, we don't know how to face. No, the Holy Spirit will continue to guide and speak and direct with Jesus' own voice. So it's not like we're inventing something new. And yesterday we were saved by grace, but tomorrow the Holy Spirit says you're saved by your proper behavior, or by wearing the right color in church on Sunday, or by the way you vote. No, the rules won't change, and yet the Spirit will speak new things, new guidance, new direction. That can be scary if our old picture of church is that church is just a group of people who remember how things used to be. But if we are open to the possibility that God is moving us in new directions, that God has new things to say, and that when we face new challenges we haven't faced before, we aren't left to our own devices or guess to try and how to apply some Bible verse that has nothing directly to do with our current situation. We trust the Holy Spirit will continue to guide us and to stay in touch with the way and the living voice of Jesus. That's different from a reunion where all we do is look backward at the great times we used to have but aren't here anymore. Instead, the church isn't just a reunion as much as we do remember. We're a community of people being led into the future because we're in this together. And the Holy Spirit continues to speak and lead and guide and direct, sometimes in surprising ways, right? The followers of Jesus have done amazing things in the last 2,000 years since Jesus' death, resurrection, and ascension. Some terrible things, but some amazing good things because people dared to listen to the Holy Spirit, right? We've been people who have been courageous in standing up for those who are most vulnerable. We have been among those who fought to end slavery, or who led the civil rights movement in this country, who rediscovered again the scriptures were saying all along that women had a role for leadership, that God always has this way of including people who've been left out. Those things are there in the scriptures for us to discover, but the Spirit sometimes has to smack us upside the head in love and help us to see what was already there and lead us in directions we were afraid to go before. If our sense of church is always backward looking, man, things are great, how come we can't get things like they used to be? Man, that's a losing game. It is impossible unless you got a time machine, and it sure doesn't sound like hope to anybody. But good news, Jesus doesn't invite us to just gather for a weekly high school or college reunion. Jesus trusts and commends to us the Holy Spirit who will hold us and not only help us remember, but say new things to us and direct us in new places, wherever that may be, wherever we may be led. That's the conversation we're having this coming Sunday. Not just to remember what Jesus said, but to trust he still speaks, that there are new things to be said and new adventures to be shared together as the followers of Jesus in a world that still deeply needs the good news of God's presence in Jesus Christ and God's abiding love for us by the Spirit. That's the conversation we're having Sunday. You're invited to be a part of it. See you then.